What is going on, Hot Take Nation? It is David Ramsden-Wood here for another episode of Hot Take of the Day podcast. And today we're taking it onto a different level. We are going to talk about university. We're going to talk about student loans. And I am very, very fortunate to be joined by Betsy Mayotte, who is the president of TISLA, which is the Institute of Student Loan Advisors. So TISLA, not Tesla. Betsy, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. So I found you because I was reading an article and you'd given a quote just around the importance of some of the student loans, the moratorium on payments, the impact on not extending some of that by the federal government and what's been going on in 2020. There's been a pandemic. I'm not sure if you know. The market certainly doesn't know because it just goes up. But so we should have a global pandemic every year and then stocks will never go down. Doesn't that sound fun?
No,
I agree. It's pretty awful. But I did want to talk to you about student loans. So first, would you introduce your organization, when it started, how it came to be, and the service you provide, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure thing. So the Institute of Student Loan Advisors was, I lost the camera somehow. Did you want to redo that?
No, you're back. This is live TV on Zoom. Like you keep going.
Surprise! So the Institute of Student Loan Advisors is a 501c3 nonprofit that I founded in 2017 to address the issues that I was seeing with student loan borrowers. And primarily, I was seeing a lot of confusion and borrowers becoming victims to these so-called debt relief companies just because they were desperate for help. So our mission is to ensure that all consumers have access to free, expert, and unbiased student loan advice. So anyone can utilize our website. It's in plain English. And if they need further assistance, they can email us and we'll help them with their questions. We'll even on occasion help people manage disputes that they feel they have with their student loans.
So it's funny that you say in plain English, and it's also related that you say I'm going to use the word, you didn't use it, but the predatory lending practices. So walk me through how a student loan, because we're going to talk about it in the broader context of student loans. But a student says, hey, I want to go to college. I want to take this degree. I'm going to get a loan. It's granted. What happens to get it? And then what happens when they graduate? And how does the conflict arise?
Well, let me back up a little bit by just pointing out there's two primary types of student loans. There's the federal student loan program and the private student loan program. In general, we encourage people, if they do need to take out loans for school, which is something they need to be very thoughtful about, both whether they should be taking on the debt in the first place and how much that debt's going to be. But if they do need to take on debt, we do strongly encourage people to stay with the federal student loan program because of the additional protections and options for relief that are available as opposed to the private student loan program. The process is that you fill out the free application for federal student aid, which also is going to pre-qualify you for any free money, which is the ideal, that may be available. Pell Grants, institutions often use the information from the FAFSA to qualify students for tuition discounts or school-based scholarships, that kind of thing. From there, they choose the school or schools that they have in mind, and the data gets submitted to those schools and they do their thing, and the families get issued an award letter that spells out both the free money and any potential loans they may be eligible for. And then the families make the decision from there, both which school to attend and whether they want to accept all those different forms of aid. So that's sort of the front end.
What is the ratio of private loans to federal loans? Because I assume, and I had never thought about that, but I assume that when we've been talking with stimulus package and loan forgiveness that's been in the news, I assume that's only federal that would apply to. What is the percentage of private to federal loans for school?
I don't know the exact percentage offhand. I will say that the federal loan program is by far the vast majority of student loan debt. if you force me to guess, I think private student loans only make up maybe 15% of overall student loan debt.
And so most people would have some level of federal debt, and that what you're saying is that the institutions they apply to have grants or scholarship money or whatever, that in concert with the application for the federal process, you can kind of get, you're going to get this grant from the school, and then the gap for your tuition is this. So you're going to get a 4-year loan that looks like this. And then what are the terms for payback?
So for federal student loans, the basic term is a 10-year repayment. So you have equal payments for 10 years, and then the debt is paid off. However, there are a multitude of lower payment options and options for consolidation that can extend the term and lower the payment. And some of those actually have a forgiveness component baked in if you don't pay the loan off within that term. The term can be as long as 30 years.
What is the interest rate? Like, so I assume you don't start paying until the end of your college, with some exception, and then they apply a interest rate.
You definitely have to start paying once you are no longer in school. Ideally, people are at least paying the accrued interest while they're in school. We strongly encourage people to do that. As far as what's the interest rate, what time is it? The interest rates change. The way the interest rates are calculated have changed multiple times just since 2006. Up until 2006, they were variable with a cap. Now they're fixed, and Congress has sort of changed the way that's calculated. So what your interest rate is will depend on when the loan was originated. Okay. So if you have 4 years of loans, today you probably have 4 different interest rates, but right now they're around the 4s.
Okay, so like a 4-ish, which is in line with a mortgage, roughly, maybe a little bit higher. And the thing that you started with, and I don't want to dive into the controversy, but I love the role that you play as an advocate and as an advisor, helping people. And one of the things you said right off the bat was the decision to go to college and whether it's a good investment. I think I'm paraphrasing you a little bit, but talk to me about when students are thinking about taking a degree and taking on loans. What would you advise them, and what do you say to people in terms of their choice of, is this for me, and is the cost good, and is the degree good? Well, what is your advice to those people?
I'm really glad you asked me that question. What I see with families is oftentimes the college choice is more of an emotional choice than a financial choice. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be some emotion involved in the college choice, but really you need to be looking at what the best fit is for that student. And I'm talking about academics. I'm talking about the campus lifestyle, if that's suitable for the student, but I'm also talking about the financials. And you need to look at the long-term benefit versus what the debt's going to be. And the other thing I see families doing is they just look at this year's bill. So I've got my award letter and I'm getting X amount in free money, but it looks like we're going to have to borrow $15,000. Well, $15,000 maybe doesn't sound so bad, but you have to multiply that by 5, not 4, but 5. 70% of students take 5 years to complete a 4-year degree.
Oh, I didn't know that. Really? Oh.
And that's because around the same percentage of students change majors, if not schools.
70%. That is interesting.
So I was one of them. I didn't change schools, but I decided, when I walked into my college as a freshman, I wanted to be a business owner, and therefore business management was my degree choice. And by the end of year 2, I hated it. So I swapped out to business communications, and therefore I lost some credits, and it took me an extra semester to complete. And that's a very common story.
So you talked about emotion versus logic, and I think that's a really hard thing for families. And I would say, and I've shared this on the podcast before and in some of my writings, but my perception of college has dramatically changed in 2020. And to your point on cost, but We had our financial advisor in 2019. They do the 529 planning program, right? Because that's one of the services they offer. And so, they said, where do your kids want to go to college? And so I said to my younger son, where do you want to go? And he's like, I want to go to Harvard. Okay. And then I said to my older son, where do you want to go? He said, I want to go to Michigan. So I told my financial advisor that Harvard and Michigan were the schools they wanted to go. And so they ran a model based on current tuition and the inflation in tuition that they've seen over the last 10 years every year, which has been 7%, which is running 6% higher than actual inflation. And so then they ran the model and they said, on an after-tax basis, for me to put both my kids through those colleges for 4 years was going to be $792,000. Scale that up for taxes, it's like a $1.3 million before tax investment based on income. That's like 10 years of income for like really well off people. And that's without paying for anything. And that was the first thing that made me go, like, what has happened to the college system? I'm curious if you've seen that, given where you are and where you sit with inflation and this emotion versus logic and cost. And people are like, well, I got to send my kid to Harvard. But they're not thinking about $350,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah. So you touch on a couple important policy points. Everybody comes and talks to me about student debt and what a huge issue student debt is and whether there should be broad forgiveness and so on and so forth. And I don't disagree with any of those statements. I mean, look at this. I left my job and started a nonprofit to help deal, with the student debt issue. But the fact of the matter is, student debt is the symptom. The problem is the cost of higher education. And that's, from a policy perspective, that is really what we need to deal with. But then but that's sort of the big picture. But let's look at the everyday, the families that are making these decisions. And it's really difficult if your child says to you, I want to go to X school, to not do whatever it takes to send them to X school. When the same child could say to you, I want a Mercedes for my first car, and that parent would laugh at them.
Right.
They are different decisions, but are they really different decisions? You still, when you're getting your child their first car, or when you're helping them get their first car, or guiding them for them to get their first car, you want it to be the best fit for what they need. And you want to make sure that it's affordable and then they're going to get the best bang for their buck.
I like that very much. Comparing the degree to a car. I mean, that's a great, I like you very much.
Thank you. You're not so bad either. I think about, what really made this whole situation hit home for me was an experience that I had, probably 10 years ago now. At my old job, someone on our board of directors had someone they wanted me to talk to who was looking for more money to send her daughter to school. So she was looking to send her daughter to, she was a Massachusetts resident. Her daughter was a Massachusetts resident. Her daughter wanted to go to University of Rhode Island, which out of state meant out of state tuition, which is like double the cost. She'd gotten an amazing package. Like any dollar that was out there, she had gotten that package, but she was still short. I think it was like 10 grand. And we went through all the options and there really wasn't any other than for her to take out additional loans, which she wasn't prepared to do. And so that I said, so why does your daughter want to go to URI? What does she want to study? And she said, criminal justice. I said, perfect. The University of Massachusetts has a nationally known criminal justice program. With the package you got, she could go there for free, no loans at all. And this woman screamed at me like I've never been screamed at before. She went all out Karen on me because her daughter wanted to go to URI and she should be able to go to URI. And if you think about that, there was no logic to it. URI didn't have a very good criminal justice program. Maybe they do now, but they didn't at the time. And she was willing to go into debt she couldn't afford to send her daughter there versus a school that was excellent at what her daughter wanted to study that she should have gone for free.
So you tee up a great conversation that brings me back to what you said about 5 minutes ago around that student loans are a symptom of the problem and that the cause of the problem is the inflation and the cost of higher education. And you could take that one step further and say, and society's obsession with college degrees, because some of the smartest people I know are business owners that didn't go to college and that have had amazingly successful careers because they're hardworking, they're tenacious, they can deal with adversity. But that's a separate topic. But so if you were the president right now, yeah, because Trump's going to resign, and so you have 20 days and you get to do all the things before Joe comes in. What would you do to fix higher education? And part two is, how much will coronavirus of 2020 and the change in learning models, online campus applications, money, go to fixing that? But answer the first part first. What would you do to change the cause and make it better?
There's no one answer. It's not a simple solution. There's so many factors into it, but a couple of things that I would do, and let's pretend that my executive order powers are broader than they really are.
You mean like you saw a real president? Like you think you can do things that you can't actually do, but you're going to sign it with a lot of fanfare. It's going to be very impressive.
Or let's pretend that Congress was on board with me and was willing to put this through. But I would re-incentivize states to reinvest in higher education. If we can get community colleges and state colleges to the point where middle and low income families can afford to attend, I'm not saying for free, I'm saying debt free, then I think we're going to go a long way. I think that would help. Listen, I'm not an economist, I'm just a student loan nerd, but I do think that would also force some of the private colleges to also adjust their pricing if state schools and community colleges people were able to attend debt-free, the middle class and the lower income families. The other thing I would do is I would I think it's time for schools to have some skin in the game when it comes to student debt. One thing that they could do was if the school had a default rate that was more than the national average, they would be forced to return a certain percentage of the federal student loan money they'd received and put that funding into a program that would help the borrowers that were in default get out of default and provide them some relief.
I like that. So the schools, so on top of the money that the students are getting, are schools also getting money from the federal program?
The vast majority of the student loan money the student never sees it. It goes to pay their tuition.
Okay. So in that way, so a student applies and it basically just goes directly to the school. So clearly they count on the money, because if the loans weren't available, the students wouldn't go, there would be a budget deficit and they'd actually have to make hard decisions.
Most schools would fold if they couldn't receive federal student aid money.
So is that part of the issue? I mean, I've heard people talk about this issue, and again, I don't want to politicize it by saying bad Obama, because I don't ever think that that's the case. I think there are trade-offs. But as I understand it, Obama was one of the advocates for expanding the student loan program to allow students better access to capital, which they've clearly taken, because as I recall, it's about $1.5 trillion of student loan debt that's outstanding. And at the same time, inflation has been 7% because emotionally people are not price sensitive when they feel like they're not actually spending their own money and they're sort of kicking the can. So is part of the problem even just that the program exists at all?
You know what? I have been doing student loan compliance and advocacy work since the earth cooled, it feels like. And I have read my share of white papers. And half of those white papers blame student loans for the cost of education, and the other half say that it absolutely is not the fault of the federal student loan program. So I don't know. Again, I think the issue is complicated. I think that the fact that we've given families the ability to pay for college certainly hasn't resulted in schools being forced to be more thoughtful about their pricing. But on the flip side, the families that are, a lot of students are choosing schools based on the amenities, and that ups the cost of attendance. So I don't think you can point that finger in a single direction. I think you have to point that finger in all the directions.
What do you think about some of the degree choices? And we're going to come back to the whole thing about student forgiveness, because I think we're talking about the macro of everything going on, and we're going to come back to student forgiveness, and then we're going to go from there. But are some of these degrees, like, why are schools offering degrees in, I don't know, 1230 Christian studies of the Catholic interactions in Rome? I mean, it's not even a degree. I'm sure it's a degree somewhere. But, like, why are schools even allowed to offer that? Because there's going to be no job in that. And why are students choosing to take such an obscure degree? I'm curious your take on it.
That question is the saddest question out there when that illustrates the real issue of student debt and the cost of higher education. Because what that question illustrates is that the days of education just for education's sake are long gone. And that, to me, I mean, think about when the first colleges started, the Oxfords of the world and so on. That wasn't to get a better job. That was education for education's sake, just to expand your mind and better yourself. And I think that's really, really sad that those days are, for all intents and purposes, gone. With that in mind, you asked why are colleges offering those degrees? Because there is still something to be said of education for education's sake. But it goes back to making a financial decision of, are you going to go into significant debt that you aren't going to be able to get a job that would allow you to comfortably pay that debt? Is that the right decision? Now, remember, you said a little while ago, and I agree 100%, four-year college, not for everybody. I think everybody should get a higher education, but that might look like an apprenticeship, an internship, experience in other ways, or a four-year degree or a graduate degree, or get your doctorate. But if you have a passion for a topic and you want to educate yourself that for the sake of education, not for a career, then you should absolutely be able to do that. But it might take you 10 years to do it because you can only take one class at a time and pay it out of pocket.
You know what? I have to tell you, I absolutely love the way that you framed it. Because when you said it was a sad question, I actually didn't think you were going where you went. And it does bring us back to the whole point of college. And it brings us back to the whole educational system, which we'll talk about more broadly. But you're supposed to go to expand your mind. And the fact that it's $70,000 a year to expand your mind. I remember when I went to university, I went in Canada, so this is going to make all people upset. But I did an engineering degree, which I did not do in 5 years. I actually did it in 6 years because I had an internship between year 4 and 5. So I had a 16-month work term where I got to work in industry. And, I was slave labor to an oil and gas company, which was the best experience I've ever had. But my tuition, as I recall, was $3,000 a year, Canadian. And because I was on the honor roll in high school, there was something called the Alexander Rutherford Scholarship, which meant you got $500 a year per year you were on the honor roll. So I was on the honor roll all 3 years, which meant for 4 years I got $1,500 as a scholarship from the province, which meant that I paid $1,500 a year to get an engineering degree.
That's amazing.
Now, at $1,500 a year, I would 100% support anyone to take any study because they truly would be studying what they care about. And at that price, it's not about economics. But at $70,000 a year to go to Harvard, to take an obscure degree that doesn't have a job associated with it, and then not work in that field and be saddled with $350,000 debt, that seems like a horrible decision for the kid, and more importantly for the parents to allow it, which brings it back to the emotional thing that you said, which takes us to, so should student loan be forgiven, given that a lot of the choices people made were just bad investments? Or should there be more of a magnanimous, like, we also should incur part of the blame for encouraging everyone to go to college and not talking about it like a rate of return, and so we're going to incur some of that, so we'll forgive $50,000 of debt? Where do you come out on the debt forgiveness debate?
So my position on broad student loan forgiveness is that if you borrow the money If you borrow the money, then you have a responsibility to repay it. However, if you need help, we should be helping you. So, and that might sound a little bit like waffling, but where I'm at is that, the student loan system, it is what it is right now, and we're in the situation we're in. So I think having programs such as the income-driven repayment programs, which bases the payment on your income and make sure that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, huge fan of those. As far as broad student loan forgiveness goes, again, my response to it is a little complicated. My first question is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for relief, or are you doing it for stimulus? And depending on what your answer is, let's talk about whether it's really going to provide relief and who it's going to provide relief to,
So let's pretend it's for relief. What would your answer be if I said I'm forgiving it for relief of people?
So I would I think we should do it but it should be based on income. If someone owes six figures in student loan debt and they can't afford it, they're likely on an income-driven plan, which your payment is based exclusively on your income. So forgiving $10,000 isn't going to make a difference of a penny in your budget, because your payment's going to stay the same, because again, the payment's based on your income. But if you owe less than 10 grand or less than 15 grand, in all likelihood, you never completed your degree, so you have debt with no degree. And if your income is low, even though your payment's probably only $80 or $100 a month, that's $80 or $100 that you probably need to pay your light bill or your rent. So I do think that if you're doing it to provide relief, I think they should do it, but I think it shouldn't be across the board, not all 44 million student loan borrowers. It should be based on income.
So explain to me a little bit more on that. If you only have $10,000 or $15,000 of debt, in my mind, I would have thought that you only had that much left. But you're saying you're coming out of college. If you had that, it meant you probably dropped out. So your ability to even have earned income to pay off that debt, given that you never completed what you did, that's an interesting differentiation. How often does that happen out of the 44 million borrowers?
I would have to double check the statistic, but I want to say that as much as 30% of student loan borrowers never completed their credential, so they have debt with no degree.
Wow, that is mind blowing. So okay, so that's one discussion. That's the relief discussion. And there's a lot of really valid points in there. And this is what I dislike about mainstream media more than anything. And I think it's why podcasting as a medium is going to continue to grow. This is an important topic to 44 million people, and I would argue it's probably an important topic to 150, both for parents who are about to have their kids go into college, for parents whose kids have debt, for people who are doing estate planning. Like, this is a huge topic. And when you just see a headline and a very short 2-paragraph article about, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden want to, they're pushing to forgive $50,000 of loans, there's a lot of gray area in there that again, you could be on one side of the argument or the other, but like, they're not saying, well, you didn't finish your degree and you took debt. Should we be relieving that? You're already on a payment plan, so there's no actual benefit from that. You're from a high income family and you can pay it off, et cetera, et cetera. You're just making different choices. That's fascinating. Do you find that there's a lot of confusion around this topic? There must be. You started a 501c.
There really is. And what I'm seeing right now, because of all the talk of forgiveness, which scares me, is borrowers making pretty significant financial choices based on the assumption that there is going to be broad student loan forgiveness. Because personally, I don't think there's going to be, at least not anytime soon.
Spending money people don't have? What do you mean, Betsy? People are doing that?
I see people that have been taking advantage of the 0% interest rate during the waiver, and they've taken a big chunk off their loans, which is great. They're asking for refunds of that money because they don't want to feel like a sucker if the loans end up getting forgiven. I see people that are in school now that didn't need a loan to go to school this year that are contemplating taking one out to, I don't know, buy a car, pay off credit card debt, go on vacation when COVID's over, because it's going to get forgiven anyway, so why shouldn't they borrow?
I mean, you're literally blowing my mind right now.
So, um, that type of thing. I mean, listen,
It's
I'm
a
not a,
moral hazard. It's moral hazard, 100%. I
there's
mean,
certainly,
as it is, yeah.
it's no reason not to do it. There's some people that are saying that that's why we shouldn't do it, because of the moral hazard. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
But I do think that, I don't even think Biden thinks he has the executive order power to forgive the student debt, which means we need the Congress. And we have a limited pool of money. Um, if they were to do that 50,000 forgiveness, that would cost $1 trillion, which is as much as the total amount of welfare dollars given out since 1980.
Wow.
And it would only, air quote, affect 44 or 42 million people. And there are more people than that need help with this COVID. I'm starting to sound like my parents.
No, but it's
Because of the COVID, because of the diabetes,
because of the COVID. I love it.
That need help. I mean, should they be using those dollars for unemployment, healthcare, propping up small business? Something that, so now, we talked about relief. Now let's talk about stimulus, right? And I think that when the margin, even if those 2 Georgia seats go to the Democrats, the margin is so small from the majority. I think any bipartisan bill is going to want to spend those dollars in a way that helps the most people. And unfortunately, I don't think student loans is going to be that. Now, talk to me in 2 years after the midterms, when the COVID, hopefully the dust has settled and we've recovered economically, and we look at a bigger piece of higher ed legislation that addresses the cost of education. Then I think there's a shot at some limited student loan forgiveness. But right now, I just don't see it happening.
Well, I mean, and again, I love the framing in long form discussion of $1 trillion, like people who complain about welfare, and it is, I always call it intellectual inconsistency, where someone might be railing about how bad welfare is and it encourages people to do this, that, and the other, but then at the same time, they're advocating for student loan relief when they're not looking at $1 trillion versus $1 trillion. They're not looking at the sources and uses of funds. They're not looking at, as you said, the current stimulus that looks like it'll get passed today, which is December 16th, looks like $900 billion, which is supposed to help all the segments of business and economy. And as you said, the loan program is only 44 million people. So there's a lot of trade-offs on this conversation. How did you get so passionate when you said you quit your job and started a 501c program to help with this? What led you to that decision? How did you find your passion for this?
Well, the joke I say to people, my dad was president of a credit union and my mother was a teacher. So I joked that education finance was my genetic destiny. But I spent over 20 years doing student loan compliance for another student loan company that also was a nonprofit. Part of my job was I helped write some of the student loan regulations and was heavily involved in policy. So I got to see sort of all sides of it. And I also was able to work directly with borrowers. I did a lot of advocacy work in my role. So I got to see the policy side of it, as well as how those policy directly affected individual borrowers. I mean, it's really easy because I've done it, to sit in a room and say, well, let's write the regulation this way because it seems like that's going to be the best for the borrowers. But then when you actually see how that affects the people, it could be something completely different. So I don't know. I think it's just what I was born to do.
I love it. So when you think about education and we think about the investment in higher ed, let's go back to pre-higher ed, so K through 12. Do you think that we're, as a society, And again, I'm teeing off a little bit of, you've been on both sides, and as an advocate and as an advisor, you're sort of like melding both sides of what the government wants to say and what the borrowers benefit from and what companies benefit from, and like you're trying to synthesize the best solution, which I think is an art that's currently missing in politics and probably across the whole world. So I respect deeply what you're doing and appreciate the approach you're taking. If you were to look at K through 12, do you think that our education system is setting people up for success? And is that really also a symptom or a cause of this higher ed problem, in that we have this high school system and this junior high system that is building skills that aren't really useful for today? What do you think about that discussion?
I think that that's not my expertise, and it would be irresponsible of me to give a broad opinion about K through 12, with the exception of the following. I do think that if we had stronger financial literacy programs starting in kindergarten and all the way through, that would help ameliorate some of this student debt issue that we have. I also think that there's an opportunity to reduce the cost of higher education by expanding the programs that allow for what we sometimes call dual enrollment, where you're accruing some college credits while you're in high school in certain programs. Beyond that, again, I don't have kids, so my only experience with K through 12 is my own. I do remember making the handprint turkey, but that's about it. So it would be irresponsible for me to opine on it any further.
I also see, and many people would know that I very rarely refuse to have an opinion on some topic, and so I should probably take your stance on things more so than I do. But the financial literacy, I totally agree, and that is systemic in our society, which ties back to stimulus. And so, what do you think about saying to people, if you have student loans, you're not allowed to have a credit card? And I'll expand that, because here's an interesting thing that people don't think about. Credit cards, in spite of the fact that interest rates are 0%, credit cards charge 18, 20, 22, 24%. And many people use them as like cheap debt that doesn't need to get vetted through a bank, which is why you can do it. But it's also why they charge such high interest rates. And I would make the case that for those, as you said, people who have student loans who also have credit card debt, they're buying things that they shouldn't be consuming. And so a way to clamp down on in failing financial literacy, say if you have student loans, until they're paid off, you can't have access to a credit card. I mean,
I've never been asked that question before, so I need to chew on it a little bit. But I think that's running on the assumption that everybody that takes a credit card is running a balance, and I don't think that's the case. Does it become, where it really becomes a problem is if when they're running a balance, that balance increases and the interest rates increase. So should lenders or people that offer credit card, organizations that offer credit cards, be limited in the amount of interest rates that they charge, and how much credit limit that they offer to people that already have student or other types of debt?
See, it's funny, because I only thought of the question. I've never had this position before, and I agree with your point that not everybody carries a balance. However, everyone who has a debit cards are taken everywhere, and banks have a financial incentive for you to use credit cards and run up a tab, because you get charged a much higher interest rate. And so then you think about the mechanics around it, and no government official wants to cap the interest rates that credit card companies can charge, because they're charging it because A, they can, B, those people are not able to get access to capital other ways. And so there's a huge underbelly of the financial incentive to not clamp down on credit card debt, even though the reality is anyone could use a debit card, for your point. Like if you're not carrying a balance, I question myself all the time, why do I use a credit card? I've never had credit card debt ever. I pay it off 100% of the time, and I get miles for airlines that fly me to places that are closed for COVID. Like, why don't I just pay cash for everything and call it a day? But again, what other things would you potentially do to like reduce the moral hazard and maybe even create a trade-off where we say, hey, we want to forgive 10,000 of debt, but in exchange, you're going to this. Is there anything that you can think of that you would do?
I thought I've been intrigued by one of Biden's campaign proposals, where he suggest, and actually, I actually think this came from his prior boss. If think about it, where you exchange limited student loan forgiveness in exchange for community service. I think that could benefit a lot of different aspects in this country where, we need some help, whether it be picking up trash or helping to rebuild homes when there's been a natural disaster. I think that there's some potential win-win there for sure.
I like that. So, last question for you. If you could give advice to families who are contemplating taking a degree and they're going through state school, not state school, out, this, that, how do you recommend to families to approach the financial decision, and what would you do? What would you say to them, given that you have a platform to talk to many parents who are going to be contemplating college for their kids very soon?
So there's a couple things that I always say. Number one, they should run on the assumption that no matter how badly their child wants to go to school X, there's a 70% chance that they're going to change schools, or at least change majors at some point. And I know they're going to say, well, not my child. Well, yes, 70%, it's more likely than not your child. Number two is when they see that first award letter and see that first $15,000 loan they're going to have to take out, don't think about it in terms of the $15,000 loan. Think about it as 15,000 times 5, so 75. And then don't think about the 75. Think about the monthly payment and what that means. So 75 grand, you're looking at around a $900 payment per month, every single month for 10 years. Is a $900 bill in your mailbox every month for 10 years something that is affordable to you and fits with your other financial plans, such as your retirement should come first. And if the answer is no, you need to find another way. Now, that other way might not mean changing schools. Maybe it means that your child goes part-time and works to help pay the bill to reduce the student loan debt. It might mean starting in community college for 2 years and then transferring into that more expensive school. There's lots of different paths. But again, think about it in terms of what that monthly payment's going to be, and that's how you should budget around it.
I love it, and I hope that you continue to do what you're doing and continue to get the word out and continue to work on the policies that government is putting in place with the depth of expertise and knowledge and nuance that you're bringing to the topic, which I really appreciate the time you spend, because I've learned a lot about it, and I'm sure our listeners are thinking about their kids, and I think they're going to maybe go have a chat about maybe Harvard's not the place. I know I've already told my kids, you're going to the school where you get the most money or where it's the cheapest, and probably after a gap year where you've worked, so that you don't just party your face off and then drop out. So thank you, Betsy, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, until next time, be safe, be good, have a great day.